Welcome to But What If We Win with me, Zuri Horwitz. Who am I? I just ran for U.S. Congress in El Paso County, Colorado. The biggest issue I see on the left is that we do not have a plan. They have Project 2025, and we have a smattering of protests with no publicized cohesive plan if Dems get into power. We need to make sure that if Dems are elected, they are required to implement a plan to fix our broken government. Let me tell you a little bit about myself, and then I will get into what I think that plan should entail and why. I majored in history and political science at Colorado College, not a double major, a combined major, and I have a master's degree in occupational therapy. I led People-Centered Colorado Springs, which advocates for walkability, bikeability, transit, and affordable housing. The basic point is putting people-centered policy over car-centered policy, which will come in handy later. I have also volunteered and advocated for progressives up and down the ballot for the past 10 years, and I am an organizer. My goal with this podcast isn't to be original. My goal is to draw from expert opinion and policy that has been implemented successfully in other countries, states, and cities to fix systemic issues in our country. Another thing to know about me, I try to find the gaps. I'm not really interested in being there the whole time. I want to see where are we missing something and come in and do what I can to fill that gap and bring in people who are stronger and better at this than me to continue the work. And I also tend to like to build a plane while we're trying to land. So this podcast is aggressively DIY, hopefully research, writing, sound, editing, and the visuals, the content, the thoughts, the policy, and the ideas will get better over time. I will include my sources in the description of this video. We eventually would like to get on podcasting networks, but right now it's just going to be on YouTube along with some clips on social media. Check out all of these sources. They are awesome. So why am I doing this now? Well, I believe we need to have a plan. We needed to have a plan yesterday. That is why I ran for Congress, making sure I was very clear about what I stood for, making sure that we have universal health care, affordable housing, good union jobs. The list will go on, and we will talk about it more in full in subsequent podcasts. But we don't have that plan. I have even gone up to Denver to make my case with the Lever podcast. I don't think they were into it. And so I'm putting this out now. I know that impeachment, let me go and I'm going to cut this, but I'm going to find out. Citizens Impeachment is also looking into having their own podcast. This is something that I think a lot of people can be working on at the same time because I think a lot of people can be working on this at the same time. And the second podcast will actually be looking at the work that has been done that I've seen as a candidate about what people are looking for. We're going to be looking at the Colorado platform for the Democratic Party. We're going to be looking at citizens impeachment and what they're asking for. We're going to be looking at Progressive Victory and their 10 points. We're going to be looking at Working Families Party, and we're going to also be looking at a union candidate form that I filled out. That will be the second episode, just to sort of get a sense of what's in the ether, what is important. And then after that, it's going to be my opinion. But before we get into everything, let's talk about what we are facing. It will be a little bit of a rant. If you know me, that happens. I think it's really important to set the table in regards to what we are facing and trying to overcome. If we aren't honest about where we are, then we don't have a foundation that we can build on. For too long, being honest about reality is seen as uncivil, and we put politeness and civility over actual kindness, over actual policies that help people. We're all supposed to be on the same team, so we're all supposed to ignore major ethical lapses. It doesn't mean someone's evil, but it does mean that it might make them disqualified for the job. We ignore problems so that we can sit with mock relatives without fighting at dinner, essentially giving the rubber stamp to concentration camps and secret police because we don't want to be rude or upset anyone, when I think it's actually something a lot deeper. But let's get into it. So some of the things that we are facing, we have Epstein. Now, Epstein, there is sexual abuse up and down everywhere. However, Epstein is a very particular example involving many of the wealthiest people in the world not having any consequences. People abusing children, ruining lives, trafficking people, and not having any consequences. And I think it's emblematic of what's happening in our country, where the very wealthy do not have consequences. And this is part of a movement that is 50 years old, that has been documented in the master plan, where the far right and moneyed interests have gone together to enshrine corruption in government. And that has come to a crescendo at this moment. It's past the Rubicon, with a bunch of court decisions that have legalized corruption. And so this is according to the Brennan Center. The Supreme Court cases include Citizens United, SpeechNow.org versus the FEC, the Supreme Court's 2007 ruling in the FEC versus Wisconsin Right to Life, along with inaction by the IRS and by the Federal Election Commission to make it easier to be corrupt in our country. We see this in super PACs, where you can put unlimited money from corporations and private citizens into corporate PACs that are supposedly not working together, even though oftentimes they will do things like red boxing, which is putting information on their websites for the super PACs to take. We also haven't been we don't have records of their communications. We don't know how much they've been communicating, and how often is a grassroots campaign going to have money to figure out what's going on. So what has all of this corruption meant to us? According to a Rand Corporation study, $79 trillion from 1975 to 2023 has been taken from the bottom 90% to the top 10%. This isn't something you can girl boss or, boy boss your way out of. We are removing immigrants, who make up 40% of Nobel Prize winners in science. And we have also been destroying our education systems, our education system used to be the shining jewel. It used to be the thing that brought incredible talent and innovation to our country. But right now, political loyalty matters a whole lot more than good research that results not only in innovation and thought and morality and a more robust society. It makes it possible for our students to get jobs in other countries, for us to be a place that people look up to. So we are ruining our own legacy. Along with other immigrants that we have lost to ICE, we have lost farm workers, construction workers, domestic workers, and restaurant workers who power our economy, while losing white collar, middle class jobs to inept technology like AI. So while all of the costs are going up, we are getting rid of jobs for all of the people that we told to go to college and get a practical degree. There's just no job there. In terms of foreign policy, we have the money to kill school children, but we don't have the money for Medicaid. Case in point, the latest defense budget from Trump, a defense budget that would be run by a drunk joke of a man, is $1.5 trillion for 2027. This is after spending $1 trillion in 2026. How would we pay for this, quote unquote? It would be another 10% cut to federal spending in 2027, after they already passed the horrific bill that cut Medicaid spending by $911 billion over 10 years. The Congressional Budget Office, which is supposed to be nonpartisan, is forecasting a $1.85 $5.3 trillion shortfall in the fiscal year that ends September 30th, 2026. This is even worse than last year's $1.775 trillion shortfall. And then let's look at who we have in office. We have corporate Dems and brain rot Republicans. Those brain rot Republicans are the aforementioned unique pairing of the far right and billionaires. They have chosen to put money above all else. Dems have sounded less egregious, but their inaction has been the sand in the wheels stopping any positive change in our country. Both of them have the goal of winning and having power for power's sake. We have a population fed on the idea that it is practical to let our country fail. It's practical to support corruption in government over doing the hard work of fixing systemic issues. We have people at the top who have zero morality, who won the game according to how it's played, the game that puts profit above all else, and who think that the only important thing is money. Because they have, quote unquote, thrived in our profit over people system. These are not people who are innovators. These are not people who are worrying about how a policy is going to affect people. They're worrying about how is a policy going to affect my electability and how can I frame it? How can I use some platitudes to get people on my side? It's a lot easier to win if the only thing you care about is whether or not you win and you do not care about what you do while you're in office. These are people who just want the seat and will do whatever Schumer and Jeffries say. There's a great video from Thought Slime on liberal brain rot and the idea that our country will always be fine, that this is just a thought experiment and not actual policy with real consequences. This gap goes to Dems, goes to liberals who are heavily involved, but who have fallen for this line of reasoning. That was perfectly encapsulated for me in a conversation I had with a potential constituent. They told me that they don't trust politicians. They believe they're all corrupt, that they like all of my policies, and they urged me desperately to drop out for the establishment Democrat who is corrupt and doesn't support any of the same policies. That gap is how we got Trump. It is believing the same tools that got us into this mess, corruption and big money in government, will somehow be the tools that get us out of this systemic collapse. I would even argue they see all of the horrific problems in our country. It's in very sharp relief right now. Often we inherit systemic issues. We inherit slavery. We inherit prejudice. We inherit getting chocolate from Africa, using child slaves, having factories in other countries that make our goods cheap but mistreat people. But right now, we're seeing policy like killing those schoolgirls that doesn't even benefit us. And people don't want to deal with all of the horror we're seeing with ICE, with abductions, with getting rid of vaccines and putting children and our whole population at risk. They don't want to have to do the work that's required once you see the horror, because that would mean taking a chance. That would mean acknowledging reality fully and understanding that the future isn't guaranteed, that you can't just follow the ladder up to success, that the things that they were okay with in the past weren't necessarily okay, that they were a mistake. Especially for older people, it can be scary because it's a big change in their reality. this is just my speculation. I had to go through a lot of change in terms of what I saw as available. I was not a person that successfully climbed the ladder. So I just thought I was stupid when I saw problems and that it was something wrong with me, that I wasn't just successful in this society, instead of thinking, hey, this system doesn't seem to be working very well for anyone, except those that absolutely worship money and put it above all else. So the unwillingness to do the real work of change in exchange for a short-term break. Well, we just need to flip the seat. We just need to flip the seat. If we just flip the seat, without addressing any of the reasons we're here and anything that would prevent us from having this happen again. My prime example is Kristi Noem. Kristi Noem being removed from office after having spent $200 million public dollars on an ad is not a win. She has another job, and all it tells other potential Kristi Noems is you can steal $200 million from the government. And if you just wait it out, maybe you won't be able to do that under Dems, but they're not going to give you any consequences. That's somebody that should be in prison right now. So all it says is, okay, if you want to be corrupt, don't worry about it. There won't be any consequences. This isn't something you can wait out. This isn't something you can fix with quote unquote good people in office. You need to have good policies in office. Platitudes do not fix systemic issues. And when it comes to fixing systemic issues, you can make mistakes. You have to take big swings. It's a scary thing to do. It's change. It's making mistakes and then fixing those mistakes and then having to continuously be involved. One of my favorite quotes is from Benjamin Franklin, "A republic if you can keep it." We are not guaranteed a republic. We have to consistently invest in this country to make it better. It is not set it and forget it. There's no infinity machine. It is built on all of our blood, sweat, and tears to make a more perfect union. But over and over and over again, since at least 1980, Democrats have not been interested in making the case and fighting for good policy. We have elected for candidates that go towards the middle, non-policy driven place. A nothing candidate unwilling to make systemic changes, like Clinton, Biden, and Harris. And now we face that same entropy in my district and nationwide with candidates like Killen and Newsom. Biden is an example of this. He started out strong, but never was willing to make big changes. So an example is he wouldn't eradicate student debt, but he will give us refunds if a flight is canceled. While it's logical to get refunds when a flight is canceled, that does not take off huge burdens on people starting out in life. That is a fee for the percentage of people who take flights. Not everyone even flies once a year. And so these kinds of candidates focus on what I call cute politics. Policies that are good for a re-election campaign, but that do nothing to fundamentally fix systemic issues and long-term problems. The goal is, what can I run on versus how can I help people and make our government better? How can I help people and make sure that people's lives are better? People mistake the importance of having a seat at the table when getting a seat at that table is contingent on doing nothing. If the way they got that seat was contingent on worshiping at the foot of money while sacrificing the needs of the people, it isn't a table I want to be at. If all of that politician's power and self-worth is tied up in their net worth, those aren't people I want to hobnob with. We have been taught to ignore the ability of culture and protest to move the Overton window of what's possible. Let me define the Overton window from Wikipedia. It's a range of subjects and arguments that are politically acceptable to the mainstream population at a given time. For decades, Democrats have acted as though the Overton window is fixed and come to the table with a perfect compromise they know Republicans will accept instead of making the argument for good policies that help people. Since Carter, that's my argument, although it was probably even earlier, Democrats have been unwilling to go to the table and go to bat for really great policy. They only go to bat for what they think can get passed. At the same time, the far right and wealthiest have moved that Overton window to hurt trans people, LGBTQ people right now, erode civil rights, as we're seeing with the SAVE Act. The LGBTQ people, we're seeing that with the Supreme Court striking down a ban in Colorado on conversion therapy. They're taking away the freedom of millions of people through our for-profit carceral system, putting us at the 6th highest percentage of people imprisoned in the world. In 2015, the U.S. held 21% of imprisoned people in the world, even though we are only 3.3% of the world's population. We need to move the window of what's possible away from a cruel hierarchical system that puts money, gender, race, and religion into a ladder, where you are allowed to climb only so high based on your race, based on your gender, and especially based on how much money you have. We need an ecological system that puts people first and finds ways to reward and nourish each of our unique strengths as human beings while supplementing each other's weaknesses with each other's strengths. We will not move this window through big money billionaires taking pity on us. We will fix our county and our country through grassroots organizing, through elevating each other and our unique gifts, even if I am currently extremely burnt out from organizing and doing that work right now. I'm going to talk about one of my favorite Jewish folktales called a midrash. I think it's really important. I think people lose it. It's about a poor man who God gave a lot of money because he saw him helping his neighbors. And then once he got all this money, he became very selfish. So a prophet came to his door and he said, "Look out your window. What do you see?" And he said, "I see my neighbors." And then he said, "Look in the mirror. What do you see?" He said, "I see myself." That silver is a barrier between us seeing each other. When we have huge income inequality, we are not able to see each other. We are not able to understand each other's lived experiences. Being a billionaire is one of the saddest ways of living. I would say even, when you're getting up at 10 million, at 50 million, you are losing track of humanity. Because every interaction you have, the power differential in terms of money is so big that you don't have a real therapist, you don't have real friends, you don't have real family, because you could make or break someone's life with a flick of your wrist. And that means nobody needs to be honest with you. They're just trying to get into your good graces. And that's why when people say, well, talk to this person or blah, blah, blah. I don't need to talk to somebody if I see their entire campaign based on money. Because I know that if I don't have more money than they do, I am not a player in their mind. Because if their whole campaign is based on money, I definitely don't have the money to be a player. But I do have the ability to change public opinion on what is possible and what we need to see happen at the federal level. We all do have the ability to change what is possible for all of us. We have to be organizing, and we need to fix the U.S. in a brass tacks way. We need nonviolent resistance with a long-term plan. And some of that we have been seeing from unions, from school teachers, from grocery workers, from baristas at Starbucks who are still on strike, don't cross the line, from JBE, let me make sure I have the right, meat packers in Greeley, Colorado, going on strike for not getting enough money to go up with the cost of living and having to pay out-of-pocket expenses for necessary PPE. Let's look at what people who are kind of more involved in this, who have researched this. So we're going to look at why civil resistance works from Ellen Chenoweth and I think it's Maria J. Stefan. If I get it wrong, it will be in the notes. And most of this is from an article with, the Harvard Gazette. Let me check and make sure. Thanks for your patience with me. From the Harvard Gazette. with Ellen Chenoweth, but I think it's really important. So this is what they did. For 2 years, Chenoweth and Stephan collected data on all violent and nonviolent campaigns from 1900 to 2006 that resulted in the overthrow of a government or in territorial liberation. They created a data set of 323 mass actions. Chenoweth analyzed nearly 160 variables related to success, criteria, participant categories, state capacity, and more. The results turned her earlier paradigm on its head. In the aggregate, nonviolent civil resistance was far more effective in producing change. They also found that the important number was 3.5% of the population participating in order to go from dictatorship to democracy. In the US, that would be 11.5 million people, give or take. So what does this entail? First off, according to her, and she's noticing it, we need to be mobilizing with a long-term strategy or plan. We can't be like the dog that catches the car. We have done this. We won with Biden and we did nothing to shore up our democracy while he was in power. And that's why it was so easy for Trump to come in and basically what looks like do a kill blow to our country. And that has been proven based on Chenoweth's research. Now, in terms of what that plan must include, the first is a large and diverse participation that's sustained, and this is from the article. The second is that the movement needs to elicit loyalty shifts among security forces in particular, but also other elites. The third thing is that the campaign needs to be able to have more than just protests. There needs to be a lot of variations in the methods they use. For example, May Day is coming up. It's a general strike. Please do not go to school, do not go to work, do not spend any money. Save up your money this month so that you can participate in May Day on May 1st. The fourth thing is that when campaigns are repressed, which is basically inevitable for those calling for major changes, they don't descend into chaos or opt for using violence themselves. But the thing is, if we get into power and we don't have a plan, we have already lived this. We have gone to the middle, run candidates without any plans, run candidates that are not listening to what people are concerned about, like genocide in Gaza, and acted shocked, Pikachu surprise face when things don't work out. So this is what this whole podcast is going to address. Making that plan. That plan is based on my research from running for Congress, and then we will I'll go through what I think, and then my hope, if I have the energy, is to then talk to experts to refine and improve my ideas and thoughts so that they're better. But to begin with, there are two components that need to happen when Dems get into power. We need to have accountability, and we need to improve people's lives. So that includes accountability for the Supreme Court, for Congress, and the executive branch. That includes accountability for everyone involved with Epstein. That means making sure that people can trust their government. Because it doesn't matter if we put policies in place if people don't trust their government to implement them because they keep seeing that at the top there are no consequences for a bad actor. It means impeaching and removing Trump. It means impeaching and removing Kristi Noem. Making sure that all of these people like Hegseth are prosecuted and jailed if necessary. They can't just be removed. They can't just go back to civil society like that was normal. They need to face consequences for their unlawful actions, their unlawful and unconstitutional actions. And that includes the Supreme Court ruling against the Constitution over and over again. When it comes to improving lives, there's short-term and there's long-term. All right, so let's talk about short-term and long-term, and we'll use Zohran Mamdani, Mayor Mamdani, as an example. So short-term, when we need to get in there and we need to improve lives. So he's doing things like filling potholes and making sure that snow is shoveled after a giant snowstorm. That immediately has a material positive effect on people, and he's paying people. Long-term, Mamdani is fighting for universal childcare for those 2 years old through kindergarten age, and he's also working to implement a millionaire tax. For us, that would be universal healthcare, affordable housing with a public option, and good union jobs. Short-term stuff is going to be a lot more dependent on what's going on right now and addressing that quickly. Long-term is those big systemic issues. Also, I want to note that the company that the meatpacking workers are striking from is JBS in Greeley. I said JBE, it's JBS. So what this show will do, I'm going to repeat myself again. The next episode, we'll go over some of the plans I saw as a candidate from Working Families Party, unions, the Colorado Dem Party platform, and citizens impeachment. After that, I will use the research I did as a candidate as a jumping off point for the following areas. The list will most likely expand. And then long term, I would like to work with experts or hear from experts to refine and improve these ideas and areas of need. Also, experts include people with lived experience, people who are volunteers, people who work in nonprofits, who have boots on the ground and know what's going on in the community. So some of these things will include foreign policy, healthcare, AI, big tech, good union jobs, affordable housing, federal institutions, universal healthcare, big money out of politics, impeaching and removing and prosecuting Trump and his cronies, stopping war in the Middle East. As you can see, I'm still figuring out whether I want to really break these things down into separate episodes or whether they'll be more general. The goal is to be a bit general, but have them as a starting off point. What I always talk about is when you're learning anatomy, you need to know what the system does before you know what the Krebs cycle is. It doesn't help if you know how protein is made and powers our body if you don't know why it's doing that and in what system. Anyway, some other things are abolishing and prosecuting ICE and having a fairer immigration system, making sure that we address higher learning. For example, prior to I think it's 1970, don't quote me on the date, states provided about 50% of the funding for college. And then the rest mostly came from the federal government so people could have a summer job and pay for their schooling and also pay for their housing because housing costs weren't so high. Then it's K through 12, education, civil rights and human rights, transit, air travel, the VA, the CDC, tax reform, and gun control. Just hitting all of the big things. But I think it's really important that when we get in there, we are very clear about what needs to happen, that this has been in the ether, that it is organized, that there is a place to go where you can say, this is what we do. They have a 900-page document in Project 2025. We need our own document that says where we want to go. I think the key isn't that we get everything exactly right, that we know exactly what's going to happen, but we need to know what we're going to. We need to have a North Star in terms of what we're working on. And that's what I hope to have with this podcast, and to have some very concrete examples of what has worked in the past. In the meantime, in Colorado, support Milot Quiros, Milot Quiros in Denver. She's running for Congress. David Seligman running for Attorney General. Julie Gonzalez running for U.S. Senate. Phil Weiser running for governor. And Amanda Gonzalez, who is running for Secretary of State. Sign up and volunteer with the Graduated Income Tax Initiative, which will help plug the gigantic fiscal hole from the Big Beautiful Bill and Tabor, and that money will go to pay for education, Medicaid, and childcare and early education. In the long term, we must repeal Tabor locally, especially with someone like Trump in office blowing up the budget over and over again. And we must have people in office willing to do the hard work, who aren't there just because they have a bunch of money, but are there because they're grassroots and they're going to make our country better. We are at an inflection point. We are not guaranteed a functional government. I think too many people believe that the U.S. exists as an unending institution that we can inflict all kinds of harm on. And right now we have done so much harm with Trump and so much harm with having politicians in power who will not do the real work of shoring up our government, that will not have the fights that need to happen in order to make our country a kinder and better place to live for everyone who lives here. Also, there will be a May Day event in Acacia Park in Colorado Springs from 2 to 6 p.m. Whether you're in Colorado Springs or not, please make sure that you go on general strike, that you do not work, that you do not go to school or spend any money. We've got a month. Let's make sure, well, a little less than a month, that we do something different, that we aren't just protesting, but that we're out there having an economic impact. Anyway, thank you for your time. I'll be back next week, and I appreciate you.